So in 1976, after he gets married, this is when Otis meets Henry Lee Lucas in a Jacksonville soup kitchen. Now, just a few years later, like after this meeting, Henry would become one of like the most notorious American serial killers in history. And we'll probably never find out how many people Henry actually killed, but him and Otis were working together, really. So Henry had reached Jacksonville with like no money and nowhere to stay. So he had learned that there was like a religious mission that offered free food and housing, and that's where he met Otis. The two of them somehow just connected. They started talking, chatting it up, and they really seemed to hit it off because, like, after meeting for the first time, Otis invited Henry to come back to his place. Now, Henry and Otis, they would become lovers. I think many say because of like based on like mutual attraction, and also they had similar stories. They had a lust for killing. They also had like super messed up backgrounds and family history. So they just like really bonded and connected on all that. I mean, both Henry and Otis had been raised by abusive mothers who had forced their sons to dress as girls. Both had suffered sexual trauma before the age of 10. And by the time they met, both of them were already murderers. So they're like, hey, you like that shit? I like that shit too. And then they just like hit it off, and they're perfect for each other. So for Henry and Otis, killing was like just a way for them to bond. You know, they talked about it openly. They would compare notes, and they would give each other tips. Like, hey, I chopped off the head first, and then I went for like the feet and stuff. What about you? And like, I went for the feet and stuff, not the head. Like, you know, just notes. So at this time, Otis was living in a fairly small house, but he was sharing the house with like a bunch of people. It was Otis's mom, his stepdad, Otis's wife, Otis's niece and nephew, who were like 11 or 12 years old, and then Otis. So 6 people. And I guess the family was like quite used to Otis bringing strange men home from the mission to have sexual relations with. It wasn't unusual. It was normal. But what made it weird and inappropriate was like he would bring men back to his home to have sex with him, but also to have sex with his wife and his underage niece. Yeah. You know, Otis is one of those people who like, what do you call them? When they like to watch. You know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. But when Otis brought Henry back to his place, it was a little different. He wanted Henry like all to himself. He didn't want to share. So he told his wife to go like live with the neighbors. Go stay with the neighbors, you know? So he and Henry could have the main bedroom. I guess Otis felt like his wife was in the way, and honestly he was getting a little jealous because she was trying to come in between him and Henry, you know? And Otis, he wanted Henry all to himself. Well, according to police records, shortly after Henry and Otis met, they spent their free time drinking and like cruising the highways looking for quote unquote fun. Now, apparently their idea of fun, different than a lot of ours, they like to like rob small convenience stores and banks. They stole money, food, beer, and I guess they just really enjoyed like terrorizing the staff of wherever they were robbing. Now, the two of them, they became bolder and more violent over time. Things progressed. Eventually, their crimes became more brutal to the point where, like, if the person that they were robbing or harassing, if that person, like, resisted at all, they would just, like, they didn't think twice. They would just gun them down and then just leave them in, like, a pool of blood. So apparently, Otis and Henry robbed, like, a small convenience store in western Georgia. I guess Henry had walked to the front counter. He pulled out a .22 caliber handgun, and he held it to the temple of the female clerk. He then binds her with like a rope, then drags her to the back of the store while Otis went through the register. So I guess like the woman, naturally, you know, she's screaming and she's struggling and she's trying to get loose. And Henry tells her, like, if she doesn't keep quiet, he's going to have to shoot her. So I guess at this moment, she just obeyed. So Henry and Otis were like dividing the money up. And that's when Henry noticed that the woman was trying to loosen the ropes again. So Henry, casually like walked to the back of the store and he just, again, doesn't hesitate and he shot her right through the temple. Afterwards, while Henry loaded stolen cases of beer into their car, Otis took this opportunity to have sexuals with the woman's body. And I guess they did this a lot. Yeah. Otis and Henry seemed to be like competitive with one another. Like they were trying to prove who was more lethal, who was more bad. Just not great, these guys.